I took the sanitation contract because nobody else wanted it. That's not me exaggerating. The staffing office woman actually said that during orientation. She slid a clipboard across the desk and told me, most people quit inside 3 weeks. At the time, that sounded fine to me. 3 weeks was enough to catch up on rent. 3 weeks was enough to stop my ex-wife from texting me reminders about the storage unit payment I kept missing. 3 weeks was enough to sleep without waking up wondering what exactly I'd done wrong in my marriage besides slowly becoming someone exhausted all the time. The job wasn't city sanitation exactly. It was subcontract work, private collection. The company handled overflow routes the city didn't want to absorb after a wave of foreclosures hit the county. Entire neighborhoods had emptied fast over the previous 2 years. Adjustable rates, layoffs, medical debt. Normal American collapse stuff. Quiet stuff. Not dramatic enough for national news after the first few weeks. People disappeared from neighborhoods slowly. First the cars stopped moving. Then newspapers stacked up. Then lawns died. Then entire streets turned dark at night. Banks hired liquidation companies. Liquidation companies hired clean-out crews. Clean-out crews dumped furniture, clothing, appliances, toys, photographs, paperwork, mattresses, pet cages, medicine cabinets, dead refrigerators full of spoiled food. Everything. My company handled secondary removal. That meant we collected what remained after the official cleanup crews left. Things too damaged to resell. Things nobody cataloged. Things people abandoned because carrying them hurt too much. I worked nights. 3 men per truck. Driver, lift operator, loader. Most weeks, it was just me and a guy named Luis because turnover stayed bad enough the company stopped trying to fully staff routes. Luis had been there 6 years. Heavy-set guy, mid-50s maybe, gray mustache, smelled permanently like coffee and wet cardboard. Didn't talk much unless it was about baseball or blood pressure medication. The first strange thing wasn't the rules. It was the silence. People think garbage trucks are loud. They are. Hydraulics scream. Metal bangs. Engines growl. But at 3:30 in the morning, inside abandoned subdivisions where half the houses are empty, noise feels different. The truck sounded wrong there. Like we weren't supposed to be making noise. Streetlights flickered over rows of dead windows. Some homes still had curtains. Some still had children's chalk drawings fading on driveways. You'd see patio furniture sitting untouched under layers of pollen, like someone had stepped inside for a minute and never come back out. Luis called them held houses. I asked him once what that meant. He shrugged. Houses people don't leave all the way. That was the kind of thing he said sometimes. Not trying to scare me. Just talking like somebody who'd worked nights too long. The rules came on my second shift. Folded paper in the truck visor. No company logo. No signatures. Just 6 typed instructions. Do not open sealed curbside containers marked with blue tape. If a container feels unusually heavy for its size, leave it. Do not remove photographs from damaged bins. If personal items appear repeatedly across multiple routes, report them immediately. Never collect from a house after porch lights turn on. If you recognize property that belonged to you, continue driving. I thought it was hazing. Seriously. I laughed when I finished reading it. Luis didn't. You follow those, he said quietly. What? Because people who don't stop lasting. That irritated me more than scared me. I'd worked enough bad jobs to hate cryptic workplace nonsense. Construction guys loved that kind of thing too. Old workers acting mysterious instead of just explaining hazards normally. I figured maybe the routes crossed drug houses or illegal dumping sites. Maybe blue tape signaled biohazard waste. Maybe porch lights meant squatters. Rule 6 sounded like obvious joke material though. If I recognized my own stuff, Luis kept staring through the windshield. You want it first. That stayed with me longer than I want to admit. Not because it sounded scary, because he sounded tired, like somebody discussing weather. The first week was normal besides that. Long shifts, cold mornings, fast food dinners eaten inside the cab while diesel fumes drifted through the vents. Most pickups were exactly what you'd expect from foreclosure cleanouts. Broken cribs, water-damaged clothes, boxes of unpaid bills, Family portraits smashed during eviction crews. You notice patterns after a while. People abandon expensive electronics less often than handwritten notes. They abandon winter coats constantly. Pet stuff almost always stays till the end. I stopped reading labels after the first few nights because it got difficult not to imagine the exact moment someone decided an object wasn't worth carrying anymore. Then we hit Alder Creek Lane. Half the subdivision had been emptied after flood damage. Mold remediation stickers still covered several windows. The street smelled wet even months later. Not rain exactly, right underneath drywall. We were halfway through the route when I saw the container. Black curbside bin. Blue tape wrapped twice around the lid. Nothing unusual besides that. Louis saw me slowing. Leave it. It's one container. Leave it. What happens if we don't? He looked at me finally. You want to carry it? I almost said yes out of stubbornness alone. Instead, I drove past. In the side mirror, I watched the bin sitting under a dead porch light. The lid moved a little. Not opening, just shifting. Probably rats. Still bother me though. Around 5 in the morning, we stopped near the transfer station for coffee from a vending machine that tasted like burned plastic. I asked Luis how many workers quit. Most. Because of ghost stories? No. He stirred powdered creamer into his cup. Because eventually the routes stop feeling empty. I remember laughing nervously. You always talk like this. He ignored me. Don't break the rules, Eddie. That surprised me because I hadn't told him my first name. The company paperwork had my last name only. Maybe he heard it at orientation. Maybe. The second strange thing happened 4 nights later. We were servicing another foreclosure zone about 15 miles from Alder Creek. Different neighborhood entirely. Different county section. I hopped out to drag a damaged container toward the lift arm and saw a child's backpack lying beside it. Yellow fabric. Cartoon sharks. Mud stains near the zipper. Normal enough. Then I noticed the name stitched into the side pocket. Mila. I knew that backpack. My daughter had owned the exact same 1-2 years earlier. Not similar. Exact. Same rip near the top seam where our dog chewed it. Same faded sticker peeling off the front pocket. I just stood there staring. Divorce does strange things to your memory. Certain objects hit harder than photographs because they belong to routines. Lunch packing. School mornings. Tiny repetitive parts of life you assume will continue forever until suddenly they don't. Luis leaned out the truck door. Leave it. My stomach tightened. It's my kids. No, he said. It isn't. I picked it up anyway. The fabric felt damp. Cold too. Like it had been outside in winter air, even though the night was humid. Inside was nothing except a folded drawing. Crayon picture. 3 stick figures holding hands outside a house. The child had labeled them Mommy, Daddy, and Mila. But the handwriting wasn't my daughter's. The names weren't even ours. I dropped the paper immediately. Something about seeing another family inside an object I recognized made me feel dizzy for a second. Luis took the backpack from me carefully. Didn't touch the inside. He placed it back beside the curb. We're going, he said. What the hell is this? Not here. We drove 3 streets before he spoke again. You ever donate clothes? What? After your divorce. Ever dump old stuff? Yeah, some. You throw anything away? Obviously. He nodded slowly like that mattered. Then he said something I still think about almost every day. Some things don't stay thrown away. After that, I started noticing repetition. Not impossible repetition at first, just unlikely. A ceramic bird figurine appearing in separate neighborhoods 50 miles apart. The same green blanket folded inside different disposal piles. A water-damaged cookbook with identical burn marks. Luis always noticed before I did. Don't touch that. Leave the box. Skip this address. He knew things before opening containers sometimes. Or maybe he recognized patterns faster. I told myself that. The problem was the object started carrying emotional weight that didn't belong to me. I don't know how else to explain it. I'd lift a bag and suddenly feel overwhelming embarrassment without understanding why. Or grief. Or panic. Brief flashes. Not memories exactly. More like emotional residue. One night, I grabbed a stack of old towels from a curbside pile and suddenly knew, with complete certainty, that somebody had hidden cash inside one of them during an argument. The feeling hit so hard I actually checked. Nothing was there. Louise saw me unraveling the towel. You felt it. I dropped it. Felt what? He didn't answer. The transfer station supervisor was named Crenshaw. Thin guy, always chewing antacids. Smelled like cigarette smoke trapped in old uniforms. I asked him about the rules during lunch break one morning. He stared at me too long before responding. You follow procedures and you'll be fine. What procedures? The ones they gave you. Where did they come from? No idea. Bullshit. You've worked here 8 years. He shrugged. Long enough. Has somebody died? That actually made him smile a little. Not the way you mean. Then he walked off. That was around the point sleep started getting difficult. I kept dreaming about houses I'd never lived in. Not nightmares exactly. Just deeply ordinary moments. Standing in unfamiliar kitchens. Watching rain through windows I didn't recognize. Listening to arguments happening somewhere else in the house. Always accompanied by this crushing feeling of financial pressure. Bills. Debt. Shame. I'd wake up convinced I'd forgotten something important. Sometimes names. Sometimes addresses. Once I woke up trying to remember a dog that never existed. I started drinking more energy drinks during shifts because exhaustion made everything worse. The routes blurred together. Street after street of abandoned domestic life. Baby gates. Artificial Christmas trees. Wedding decorations. Medical equipment. Things soaked with years of human routine. The city looked haunted long before anything impossible happened. That's important. People imagine horror arriving suddenly. Most of the time, it's already there hiding inside normal sadness. The real break happened during rain season. Heavy storms flooded drainage systems across the county and delayed several cleanup operations. Overflow routes backed up for weeks. That's when the sealed containers multiplied. Blue tape everywhere. Not just one or two anymore. Entire streets had them. Luis became visibly nervous, checking mirrors constantly, smoking despite claiming he quit years earlier. One night, he handed me another paper before shift start. Different rules. Handwritten this time. If a resident speaks to you from inside a condemned home, do not answer. Do not accept drinks. Do not read notes left in containers. If an item returns 3 times, burn it. I remember getting angry then. Not scared. Angry. What is this actually about? Luis rubbed both hands over his face. You ever clean out your parents' house after they die? No. It changes how you think about objects. That doesn't answer anything. He looked exhausted. You carry enough of people away. Eventually, some of them stay attached. That's insane. Yeah. He said it very quietly. Probably. That same night, we picked up from a cul-de-sac scheduled for demolition. Most houses were already gutted. Drywall removed. Copper stripped. One porch light was on despite the property supposedly being vacant. Rule 5. Never collect from a house after porch lights turn on. I slowed the truck. Luis immediately tensed. Keep moving. Then the front door opened. Not dramatically, just slowly. An elderly woman stood inside the doorway, wearing a pale nightgown. Rain hissed against the pavement. The woman looked tired more than frightening. You missed ours last week, she called. I remember the exact feeling that hit me. Recognition. Not her face. Of her voice. Like I'd spoken to her before years earlier. Luis grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. Drive. The woman stepped onto the porch. I know you, she said to me. My chest tightened instantly. Not fear. Grief. Sudden, overwhelming grief. Like hearing news you already expected. I don't fully remember pulling away. I just remember looking in the side mirror and seeing the porch light shut off by itself while she still stood there. Luis didn't speak for 20 minutes. Then finally, she talked directly to you? Yeah, that's bad. What was she? No idea. Bullshit. He shook his head slowly. You think I know because I stayed. I stayed because nowhere else paid enough. That felt honest. More honest than anything else he'd said. A few days later, I started checking route archives. The company stored pickup logs in a basement records room beside the maintenance garage. Thousands of handwritten entries. Addresses. Tonnage. Missed collections. Hazard notices. Most boring paperwork imaginable. Until you notice repetition. Same addresses appearing years after demolition. Collection requests submitted by dead homeowners. Entire routes reassigned after notes reading employee distress or cognitive decline. I found Luis's name attached to routes dating back almost 12 years. Always the same zones. Always foreclosure districts. Then I found something stranger. Incident reports. Very short. Very clinical. Worker reports identifying personal belongings among unrelated collections. Worker exhibits emotional attachment to non-owned property. Worker demonstrates memory displacement after unauthorized handling. Recommended reassignment denied. Memory displacement. I copied that phrase in my phone. Later that night, I searched online. Nothing useful except psychiatric articles about trauma transference and object attachment. Still sounded ridiculous. Until the phone call started. My ex-wife called around noon after a shift. She sounded confused. "Why did you tell Mila about the lake house?" "What lake house?" "Your voicemail." "I didn't leave a voicemail. You talked about summers there. About teaching her to fish." I almost corrected her automatically before stopping. Because for half a second, just half a second, I remembered it. A lake. Wood dock. Green tackle box. Sunlight reflecting off water. The memory felt real enough to hurt. Then it vanished. I've never owned a lake house. Never even fished regularly. My ex-wife kept talking, but I barely heard her. That night, I nearly quit. I actually parked outside the dispatch office around sunset, intending to hand in my badge. Then I saw Luis sitting alone beside the loading dock smoking. Something about how tired he looked stopped me. I sat beside him a while without talking. Finally, I asked, "Why don't you leave?" He stared at the cigarette ember. "Been here too long." That's not an answer. Yes, it is. Wind pushed garbage smell across the yard. Rotting food. Wet paper. Chemical cleaner. Luis exhaled slowly. "You know what happens when people lose houses?" "Yeah." "No. I mean really lose them." He tapped ash onto concrete. "They leave parts of themselves everywhere. Fights. Illness. Debt. Kids growing up. Divorces. Deaths. Addiction. Years of life packed into objects nobody wants. Then strangers carry it away like it weighs nothing." He looked at me. "But it does weigh something." That stayed with me. Not because it explained anything. Because I already knew he was right. You could feel it on certain routes. The emotional heaviness. The reason workers avoided eye contact after particular pickups. The reason nobody joked near sealed containers. About a week later, we found the first repeated item. Official repeated item. A red ceramic coffee mug. White chip near the handle. We collected it from a condemned duplex on Monday. I remembered because Luis made me wear gloves before touching it. Thursday, it appeared again 3 towns over. Same mug. Same chip. Same lipstick stain near the rim. Luis looked genuinely frightened this time. "Don't load it." "What do we do?" "Call dispatch." Dispatch told us to leave immediately. No explanation. The next night, the mug appeared again. This time outside my apartment door. No note. No sound of anyone leaving it there. Just sitting on the hallway carpet under flickering lights. I didn't touch it. I stared at it for maybe 2 full minutes before calling Luis. He answered immediately like he'd been expecting it. "Don't bring it inside." "What is happening?" "You touched something. That doesn't mean anything. It means something noticed you carrying it." I wanted concrete answers so badly by then that I almost started yelling. "What notices us?" Silence. Then, "I don't think it's one thing." That scared me more than if he'd describe a monster. I barely slept that week. Dreams got worse. Not supernatural exactly. Just intimate. I kept dreaming about sitting at dinner tables with strangers while everyone acted like I belonged there. Different houses every night. Different families. Arguments already in progress when I arrived. Sometimes people looked at me with resentment. Sometimes affection. Sometimes disappointment, so deep it made my chest hurt after waking. The details lingered too long afterward. I started forgetting small, real things. Passwords. Dates. Whether certain conversations had happened with my ex-wife or inside dreams. Then I found photographs in my apartment that weren't mine. That sounds insane. I know. I checked everything afterward thinking maybe I brought them home accidentally from a route. But I hadn't. Old Polaroids. Family barbecue. Christmas morning. A little boy beside a bicycle. None of the people familiar. Yet every image carried this awful emotional recognition, like I was remembering feelings instead of faces. I burned them in a metal sink. The smoke smelled sweet, not chemical, almost like old perfume. The next shift, Luis looked at me once and said, "You burned something? How did you know? You smelled different." I nearly walked off the job right there. Instead, I demanded answers. Real answers. Luis finally told me what he believed. Not facts, beliefs. Years ago, after the foreclosure crisis worsened, sanitation workers started reporting psychological problems concentrated around abandoned residential collections. Memory overlap, emotional instability, false recognition. Eventually, certain objects began reappearing after disposal. Always emotionally significant items. Wedding rings, children's toys, cookware, photographs. Workers who repeatedly handled them developed severe identity issues. One man attacked his own brother, claiming he was living in the wrong house. Another vanished after driving routes alone. One woman checked herself into psychiatric care, insisting her dead child kept leaving objects around her apartment. No official explanation ever stuck. Some blamed mold exposure. Others chemical contamination. Luis thought it was simpler. People leave themselves behind, he said, and maybe enough abandoned lives pile together into something. That shouldn't have made sense. But after months around those routes, it did. Not logically, emotionally. Cities carry residue. Not paranormal residue, necessarily. Human residue. Pain compressed into physical spaces. I asked why the rules existed. To reduce attachment. Why 6 rules? Used to be more. What happens if you break them? Luis looked at me carefully. You start carrying too much home. The near contact happened in February. Coldest night of the year. Freezing rain. Our route covered an unfinished subdivision outside county limits. Half-built homes abandoned after the developer went bankrupt. No streetlights. No occupied houses for miles. We found a blue-taped container sitting alone beside an empty lot. No nearby structure. Just mud and dead grass. Luis told me not to stop. Then we heard knocking. Very soft. From inside the container. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I still don't know why I got out of the truck. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe anger. Maybe part of me wanted proof this was all some elaborate psychological spiral. The container wasn't large enough for a person. I remember that clearly. Rain ticked against the plastic lid while I stood there breathing steam into the dark. Then I heard crying. Not loud. A child trying not to cry loudly. My body reacted before my brain did. I reached for the lid. Luis screamed my name. Actually screamed. The crying stopped instantly. Complete silence. Then from inside the container, in my daughter's voice. "Dad!" Everything inside me froze. Not metaphorically. My thoughts genuinely stopped. Because it was her voice exactly. Small speech hesitation and all. I stepped backward so fast I slipped in mud. Luis dragged me physically toward the truck. The container started shaking. Not violently, like someone inside was slowly turning around. I remember hearing another voice underneath my daughter's. Adult male. Then several more, layered together. Not words, just domestic sounds. Arguments, laughter, crying, television noise, plates clinking. Entire households compressed in a muffled sound. Luis shoved me into the cab. We drove away too fast for the icy road. Neither of us spoke for nearly an hour. Then, quietly, without looking at me, he said, "Now it knows where to reach you." Luis disappeared 3 days later. Company said medical leave. Nobody believed it. His apartment was cleared out almost immediately. No forwarding address. No relatives listed. Dispatch reassigned me to another driver named Collins who refused to discuss routes at all. But things kept following me home. Not physically every day. Emotionally. I'd walk into grocery stores and suddenly feel nostalgia for places I'd never visited. I'd recognize strangers briefly before realizing I couldn't possibly know them. Sometimes I catch myself almost calling my ex-wife by another woman's name that lives nowhere in my actual memory. The worst part is the objects. They still appear. Always ordinary things. A kitchen timer. A pair of children's rain boots. Framed photographs with faces scratched out. Sometimes they're waiting near my apartment dumpster before dawn. sometimes inside the truck after routes finish. Once I found my own wedding photo buried inside a pickup load from a condemned house 2 counties away. Not a copy, the actual photograph from our old apartment. My ex-wife confirmed it vanished years earlier during the move. I didn't tell her where I found it. I burned that one too. Didn't help, because now the memories come without objects. Not hallucinations, just emotional bleed through. I'll be driving and suddenly miss people I've never met, or feel crushing guilt over arguments I never had. I think that's what eventually happens to workers who stay too long. You stop separating your own life from everything discarded around you. You become storage space for abandoned parts of strangers. The company still operates. Routes still run every night. Foreclosure neighborhoods still exist, though people stop talking about them much. Sometimes, around 4 in the morning, we pass houses that should be empty but have porch lights glowing softly behind curtains. Sometimes figures stand inside windows, watching the truck pass, never waving, just waiting. And every once in a while, usually near the end of shift when exhaustion gets bad enough to blur everything together, I'll see something beside the curb that belongs unmistakably to me. Not old things anymore. New things. A shirt I wore last week. Coffee mugs from my apartment. A receipt from my wallet. Last month, I saw my daughter's current school photo sitting upright inside a sealed blue tape container. Recent photo. Taken this year. I didn't stop the truck. I kept driving. But the entire time, I had this horrible feeling someone inside the container understood I'd recognized it. And lately, when I wake up before work, there's a smell in my apartment I can't get rid of. Not rot, not mold, something softer. Laundry detergent, old cardboard, rain-soaked carpet. The smell of entering somebody else's house for the first time after they're already gone.